What happens when one of Hollywood's quickest wits walks straight into a daytime talk show known for its sharp political debates, and the jokes suddenly stop feeling like jokes? It was supposed to be a fun segment. At least that's how the producers framed it when the cameras first rolled that morning. The lights inside the studio glowed warm and bright, the polished desk reflecting the familiar skyline backdrop. The audience buzzed with excitement, a mixture of talk show regulars and devoted fans who had come hoping to see the charming, sarcastic movie star who had built an entire career on humor. Ryan Reynolds had arrived smiling. He stepped onto the stage in a dark blazer and casual confidence, waving at the crowd as cheers erupted. A few people even stood up. His reputation preceded him, quick with a joke, impossible to rattle, and always ready with that signature grin that suggested he already knew the punchline. The hosts welcomed him warmly. Laughter flowed easily at first. But what happens when a joke lands in the wrong place, and someone decides not to laugh? Before we dive into what happened next, make sure you subscribe to Live Narratives, hit like, and drop a comment below if you enjoy dramatic celebrity stories like this. Because today's moment on live television quickly turned into something no one in that studio expected. The conversation began exactly the way these interviews usually do. Ryan leaned comfortably in his chair, joking about his latest film project and poking fun at his own reputation for sarcasm. The audience laughed loudly when he joked about being professionally paid to say ridiculous things while wearing a superhero suit. Hostin watched him carefully. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. Sunny was known for her sharp questions. As a former federal prosecutor turned television host, she rarely let conversations stay purely lighthearted. And while the other hosts seemed happy to let the interview drift through Ryan's usual comedic rhythm, Sunny leaned slightly forward, fingers folded together as she waited for a pause. Ryan noticed. Actors spend their lives reading faces, and something about that look signaled a shift. Still smiling, he finished a story about accidentally improvising a joke during filming that got him scolded by a director. The crowd roared. Then Sunny spoke. "Ryan," she said calmly, tilting her head just slightly. "You're very good at making people laugh. But sometimes humor can hide things." The audience's laughter faded into a quiet murmur. Ryan raised an eyebrow, amused. "Oh, absolutely," he replied smoothly. "That's actually the entire reason I developed a sense of humor." A ripple of chuckles returned. But Sunny didn't laugh. Instead, she continued, her voice steady. "I'm curious whether you think celebrities sometimes use jokes to avoid answering serious questions." The studio atmosphere shifted just a little. Ryan leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands together as if considering the question carefully. His smile remained, but now there was a hint of curiosity behind it. "Well," he said lightly, "I think comedians would be out of a job if people didn't occasionally dodge things with humor." A few people in the crowd laughed again. Sunny nodded slowly. "But that's exactly my point." The other hosts glanced toward her, sensing where this might be heading. Ryan tilted his head, intrigued now. "Oh," he said. Sunny's tone sharpened, though she kept her polite television smile. "Because sometimes audiences want more than jokes. They want honesty." The word hung in the air. Ryan's smile tightened slightly, though it was still there. "Honesty is great," he said casually. "Big fan of honesty." The audience chuckled again, unsure whether the tension they were sensing was real or just another setup for a punchline. Sunny continued. "For example," she said, "you've built an entire brand around sarcasm, around deflecting things with humor. But some critics say that when celebrities do that on talk shows, they avoid engaging with real issues." Now the room had grown noticeably quieter. Ryan leaned forward slightly. "Which issues are we talking about?" he asked. Sunny didn't hesitate. "Cultural issues, political issues, responsibility that comes with influence." A few audience members exchanged glances. Ryan tapped his fingers together thoughtfully. "Well," he said slowly, "I'm an actor who tells jokes about wearing tights and getting punched by villains." The crowd laughed again, but Sunny still didn't. "And yet," she said, "millions of people listen to what you say." Ryan paused. For the first time since he walked on stage, the rhythm of the conversation felt off balance. He looked toward the audience, then back at Sunny. "You're saying I should probably be less funny and more responsible?" he asked. The line sounded like a joke, but Sunny answered it seriously. "I'm saying influence carries weight." The other hosts shifted in their seats. One of them attempted to lighten the moment. "Ryan's movies carry a lot of weight too," she joked. "Box office weight." The audience laughed again, grateful for the break. Ryan smiled politely, but Sunny wasn't done. She leaned forward again, voice calm but direct. "Do you ever worry that constant sarcasm lets celebrities avoid accountability?" Now the tension was unmistakable. Ryan's expression changed ever so slightly. Not anger, not frustration. Something closer to curiosity, mixed with challenge. He rested his elbow on the table and looked directly at her. "Well," he said slowly, "that depends on what exactly I'm being held accountable for." The audience murmured. Sunny met his gaze, without blinking. "For the things you say, the influence you have, the narrative celebrities help shape." Ryan exhaled softly through his nose. Then he smiled again. But this time the smile felt sharper. "Sunny," he said, "are we still talking about jokes, or are we about to have a very different conversation?" The audience leaned forward collectively, sensing the moment shifting. Sunny didn't break eye contact. "I think we're already having it." A quiet ripple moved through the crowd. Ryan sat back in his chair again, clasping his hands as he studied her. For the first time since the interview began, the playful Hollywood charm had given way to something else. Focus, interest, and maybe just a hint of competitive energy. "Well," Ryan said calmly, "if we're going there." He paused. The audience held its breath. "Then I guess I should stop joking for a second." The studio fell completely silent. And in that moment, everyone watching, both in the audience and at home, realized something unexpected was about to unfold. Because the interview that started with laughter was about to turn into something much sharper. The moment Ryan said he might stop joking, a strange silence settled over the studio. It wasn't the normal pause between punchlines. It was the kind of silence that makes people shift in their seats. A few audience members leaned forward. Others glanced at the hosts, sensing that the conversation had just crossed into unfamiliar territory. Ryan Reynolds rested his forearms on the table, fingers loosely intertwined. The easygoing movie star posture he'd walked in with was still there, but now his eyes were sharper, more focused. Sunny Hostin noticed immediately. This was no longer a typical promotional interview. "Well," Ryan said calmly, glancing briefly at the audience before returning his attention to Sunny, "I'm happy to have a serious conversation. I just want to make sure I understand the question." Sunny nodded. Her voice stayed composed, but there was an unmistakable firmness behind it. "The question," she said, "is whether celebrities like you sometimes hide behind humor instead of engaging honestly when difficult issues come up." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ryan tilted his head slightly. "Interesting," he replied. One of the other hosts attempted to soften the atmosphere with a light laugh. "Ryan's whole brand is humor," she said. "If he stopped joking, half the internet might collapse." Some laughter broke out in the audience. Ryan smiled politely at the comment, but he didn't take the escape route. Instead, he looked right back at Sunny. "I guess I'd say humor is how a lot of people talk about difficult things," he said. Sunny didn't disagree. "That's true," she replied. "But humor can also be a shield." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Sometimes shields are useful," he said. A few audience members clapped softly at the response. Sunny remained steady. "But when someone has a massive platform," she continued, "shouldn't they occasionally put the shield down?" Ryan let out a slow breath through his nose, almost amused. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "this is definitely not the direction I expected this interview to go." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the room. Sunny responded immediately. "Is that a problem?" Ryan shook his head. "No, not at all," he said calmly. "I just thought we'd talk about movies and embarrassing moments on set." "Well," Sunny replied, "sometimes conversations evolve." Ryan leaned back slightly in his chair. His expression now carried that familiar Reynolds smirk, but underneath it, something else was brewing. "Okay," he said, "let's evolve." The audience reacted with a mix of laughter and curiosity. Sunny folded her hands again. Do you think celebrities have a responsibility to speak on social issues? She asked. Ryan paused for a moment, not dodging, not joking, thinking. I think everyone has a responsibility to think carefully before speaking, he answered. Sunny nodded slowly. But you influence millions, she pressed. Your posts, your interviews, your jokes, they reach people everywhere. Ryan's smile flickered again.
True, he said.
Although my last tweet was about accidentally supergluing my fingers together while trying to fix my kid's toy. The audience burst into laughter. Even a few hosts chuckled. Sunny smiled briefly, but then the seriousness returned. And that's exactly what I mean, she said. Ryan blinked once. How so? You're very skilled at redirecting with humor, she replied. The laughter faded again. Ryan tilted his head, considering her. So your concern, he said slowly, is that I joke too much. Sunny corrected him immediately. My concern is that humor sometimes prevents deeper accountability. A few audience members shifted. Ryan rested his chin lightly against his hand for a moment, studying her. Accountability for what, specifically, he asked. Sunny's voice grew slightly more pointed. For the narratives celebrities reinforce. For what they choose to address or ignore. Ryan nodded slowly. That's fair, he said. The audience seemed surprised by the calm response. Sunny continued. People watch shows like this because they want more than entertainment, she said. They want real perspectives. Ryan glanced briefly toward the crowd. You want my real perspective? He asked. Sunny didn't hesitate. Yes. Ryan paused again. Then he leaned forward slightly. Okay, he said quietly. The room felt suddenly smaller. I think actors pretending to be political experts can sometimes be just as problematic as actors pretending their opinions don't matter at all. The audience murmured. Sunny considered that answer carefully. So where do you fall? She asked. Ryan smiled faintly. Somewhere in the middle, he said, which is probably the least exciting place to be on television. A small wave of laughter moved through the room. But Sunny wasn't letting the tension dissolve. You've built a reputation, she said, for being sarcastic even when serious questions are asked. Ryan chuckled softly. That's because serious questions sometimes arrive with assumptions attached. The other hosts glanced between them now. The conversation had clearly turned into a subtle duel. Sunny leaned in again. Are you saying my question has an assumption? Ryan met her gaze. I'm saying it sounds like you believe humor equals avoidance. Sunny answered, without hesitation. In many cases, it does. Ryan smiled again, but this time it wasn't purely playful. Well, he said, I'd argue humor can also be honesty wearing a more comfortable jacket. The audience reacted with scattered applause. Sunny raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a clever line. Ryan shrugged. I'm an actor. Clever lines are part of the job. More laughter broke the tension for a moment. But Sunny delivered the next line with precise timing. Clever lines don't always equal meaningful answers. The room fell quiet again. Ryan blinked once. Then he laughed softly. Wow, he said. The audience chuckled nervously. Ryan leaned back in his chair again, rubbing his hands together once as if preparing for something. Sunny, he said calmly, can I ask you something? Of course, she replied. Ryan gestured lightly toward the table. Do interviews usually turn into cross-examinations around here? The crowd laughed loudly. Sunny smiled slightly. Well, she said, I was a prosecutor. That got a big reaction from the audience. Ryan nodded slowly. That explains the tone. Sunny tilted her head. And you seem comfortable sparring. Ryan gave a small shrug. I've played superheroes and assassins, he said. A talk show debate feels manageable. The audience laughed again. But underneath the humor, the tension remained. Sunny leaned closer, lowering her voice slightly. So let's be clear, she said. When difficult questions come up, are you willing to answer them directly? Ryan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her for a long second. Then his smile returned, but sharper than before. Oh, I'm willing, he said. He paused. The audience leaned forward, but only if we both agree to answer them honestly. A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Sunny sat back slightly. And what does that mean? She asked. Ryan's eyes sparkled now with something unmistakable. Challenge. It means, he said slowly, if we're talking about accountability, it should probably apply to everyone at this table. The audience gasped softly. Some hosts shifted in their chairs. Sunny held his gaze. Are you suggesting something? She asked. Ryan leaned back calmly. Not suggesting, he said. He paused just long enough to let the moment breathe. Just leveling the playing field. And suddenly, everyone in that studio realized the conversation wasn't just tense anymore. It was becoming a showdown. The audience felt it immediately. That subtle shift that happens when a conversation stops being polite television and starts becoming something unpredictable. Ryan Reynolds had just said the word everyone, and suddenly the focus of the conversation wasn't only on him anymore. Sunny Hostin sat very still for a moment, studying him. Her expression stayed composed, but there was now a spark of curiosity mixed with caution. The other hosts exchanged brief glances. This was live television. Moments like this could go anywhere. Sunny broke the silence first. Leveling the playing field? She repeated slowly. Ryan nodded once, relaxed in his chair, but his eyes were locked on the table. Well, he said lightly, if we're talking about accountability and influence, that conversation probably doesn't stop with actors. A ripple moved through the audience. Sunny crossed one leg over the other, leaning slightly closer to the table. You're saying talk show hosts also carry influence, she replied. Ryan shrugged. I mean, you're speaking to millions of people every morning. The crowd murmured in agreement. One of the other hosts laughed nervously. That's true, she said. But we're the ones asking the questions today. Ryan smiled.
Right.
And I'm answering them. He paused for a beat, just making sure we're all in the same conversation. The audience gave a small wave of applause. Sunny nodded slowly. I'm perfectly comfortable being part of the conversation, she said. Ryan tilted his head. I figured you might be. The tension was now strangely balanced. Not hostile,
But sharp.
Sunny rested her hands on the table again. All right then, she said. Let's talk about it. The audience leaned forward collectively. You have a massive platform, Sunny continued. Your voice reaches millions. Do you believe celebrities should use that influence to address serious issues more often? Ryan thought for a moment. Then he spoke carefully. I think everyone with influence should be thoughtful about how they use it. Sunny nodded. But that sounds like a diplomatic answer. Ryan chuckled softly. Diplomatic answers tend to keep talk shows calm. The audience laughed. Sunny didn't. Let's try again, she said. Do celebrities have a responsibility to speak up? Ryan leaned forward now. The smile remained, but his tone shifted slightly. Less playful, more measured. I think celebrities should speak when they actually understand something, he said. The room grew quieter. Otherwise, he continued, it becomes noise instead of conversation. A few audience members clapped. Sunny's eyebrows lifted slightly. So silence is better than speaking without expertise? Ryan nodded. Usually. Sunny leaned back slightly. But some people might interpret that as avoiding difficult topics. Ryan responded instantly. Or it might be respecting the complexity of them. The audience reacted with murmurs. One of the hosts tried to interject with a light comment. You two are having a full debate up here. The crowd laughed nervously again. Ryan turned toward the audience for a moment. Honestly, he said with a grin, this is the most intellectually challenging morning I've had before noon. The audience burst into laughter. Even Sunny cracked a brief smile. But the moment passed quickly. Sunny leaned forward again. Let me ask you something directly, she said. Ryan gestured for her to continue. You often joke about everything. Your career, the industry, even serious topics. Do you ever worry that constant irony can make real issues feel less important? Ryan blinked once. Then he answered more slowly than before. I think humor can actually make serious conversations easier to approach. Sunny tilted her head. How so? Ryan looked toward the audience. When people feel attacked, he said, they stop listening. The room was silent. But when people laugh, he continued, they're still open. A few quiet claps echoed. Sunny listened carefully. So humor disarms people, she said. Ryan nodded. Exactly. Sunny paused, considering. But humor can also distract people, she said. Ryan smiled slightly. True. Then he added calmly, but so can outrage. The audience reacted instantly. Some clapped. Some gasped. The hosts exchanged quick glances. Sunny's expression sharpened. Are you saying discussions about accountability are outrage? She asked. Ryan shook his head immediately.
No, he said.
He leaned forward again. I'm saying sometimes media conversations reward conflict more than clarity. The studio went quiet again. Sunny folded her hands slowly. You're criticizing the media now? Ryan chuckled softly. I'm saying the media, including talk shows, sometimes thrives on tension. A few audience members laughed nervously.
Sunny didn't.
So this tension right now, she said slowly. Ryan finished the thought for her. Is probably great television. The crowd burst into laughter. Even some of the hosts couldn't hold back smiles. Sunny took a slow breath, then leaned forward again. But let's be honest, she said. Ryan nodded. Always a good idea. Sunny's voice grew slightly firmer. You're very skilled at flipping questions around. You joke, redirect, and challenge the premise. Ryan smiled. I've been in interviews for 20 years. The audience laughed again. Sunny pressed on. But viewers might still feel like they're not getting a straight answer. Ryan's smile faded just a little. Then he spoke more quietly. You know what the tricky thing about straight answers is? Sunny waited. Ryan gestured lightly toward the table. People only call them straight answers when they already agree with them. The audience erupted into applause. The energy in the room suddenly shifted again. Sunny sat back slightly, absorbing the reaction. For a moment, the tension had turned into something closer to a genuine debate. But Sunny wasn't finished. She leaned in one more time. Ryan, she said calmly, do you think comedians sometimes hide behind humor to avoid responsibility? Ryan met her gaze. And for the first time since the conversation began, he didn't smile at all. No, he said quietly. The audience fell completely silent. Ryan rested his hands on the table. I think humor is one of the few tools people have left to question things without turning every disagreement into a fight. The words hung in the air. Sunny watched him carefully. Then she asked the question that made several hosts glance at each other in surprise. So, you believe criticism itself has become too aggressive? Ryan exhaled slowly. I think people assume the worst about each other too quickly. Sunny tilted her head. And you think that's happening here? Ryan paused. The room held its breath. Then he gave a small, careful smile. No, he said. He looked directly at Sunny. I think we're just getting started. The audience gasped softly, because suddenly it felt like the conversation was about to escalate again, and no one in that studio knew where the next question would land. A strange electricity filled the studio after Ryan said those words. I think we're just getting started. The audience reacted with a mixture of nervous laughter and low murmurs. Some people shifted in their seats, glancing between Ryan Reynolds and Sunny Hostin like spectators watching a chess match where both players had just moved their most powerful pieces onto the board. Sunny didn't immediately respond. She simply studied him. For a moment, the cameras captured a close-up of her expression, calm, composed, but unmistakably alert. She had spent years in courtrooms before television, and moments like this were familiar territory. Ryan sat back slightly, one arm resting casually on the table again. But the casual posture didn't hide the fact that he was now fully engaged. One of the other hosts broke the silence with a nervous laugh. Well, she said, this has definitely become the most intense interview we've had in a while. The audience chuckled softly. Ryan turned toward her with a quick grin. I promise I didn't plan a courtroom drama before lunch. More laughter rippled through the crowd. Sunny allowed the humor to pass, then leaned forward again. Ryan, she said, her tone measured but firm, you mentioned earlier that people assume the worst about each other too quickly. Ryan nodded. Yes. Sunny tapped her fingers lightly against the table. But sometimes criticism exists for a reason, she continued. When public figures say or do something questionable, people want answers. Ryan agreed immediately. That's fair. Sunny tilted her head. So, then why does it often seem like celebrities treat those questions as attacks instead of accountability? Ryan paused for a moment. The smile that usually arrived instantly was slower this time. Because sometimes the questions are framed like attacks, he said. A few audience members murmured in agreement. Sunny didn't look convinced. And sometimes, she replied calmly, the answers are designed to avoid responsibility. Ryan laughed quietly. That may be true. The audience chuckled at his honesty. But then he added something that shifted the energy again. Although, Ryan continued, there's another side to that. Sunny gestured for him to continue. Ryan leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but deliberate. When conversations start with assumptions about someone's intentions, he said, it becomes harder to have a real discussion. The room grew quiet again. Sunny crossed her arms lightly. Are you saying my questions assume something about you? Ryan shook his head slowly. No, he said. Then he paused. I'm saying the culture around conversations like this sometimes does. The audience reacted with a wave of murmurs. Sunny's expression sharpened just slightly. Culture, she repeated. Ryan nodded. Online culture. Media culture. Debate culture. One of the hosts nodded thoughtfully. That's actually a fair point, she said. Sunny glanced briefly toward her colleague, then back at Ryan. But when you're a public figure, she said, you can't avoid those conversations. Ryan agreed. I'm not trying to avoid them. Sunny leaned forward again. Then let's talk about something specific. The audience suddenly became very still. Ryan noticed the shift too. He raised an eyebrow. All right, he said. Sunny's voice became slightly more pointed. You often joke about serious issues on social media. Some people think that makes light of important conversations. Ryan listened carefully. Do you believe humor helps those conversations? Sunny continued. Or do you think it risks trivializing them? Ryan rubbed his hands together once, thinking. The studio lights reflected softly off the desk as the cameras zoomed in closer. Finally, he spoke. I think humor reflects how people actually cope with the world, he said. Sunny nodded slowly. But coping isn't the same as addressing problems. Ryan smiled faintly. True. Then he added something that made the audience react instantly. But outrage alone doesn't solve problems either. A few audience members clapped. Others gasped quietly. Sunny sat back in her chair slightly, studying him again. You keep bringing up outrage, she said. Ryan shrugged. Because it's everywhere. The audience murmured. Sunny leaned forward again. Are you suggesting people shouldn't be angry about serious issues? Ryan shook his head immediately. No, he said. His tone was calm, but firm now. I'm saying anger without conversation just becomes noise. The room was completely silent. Even the other hosts were watching closely now. Sunny folded her hands again. And what does a productive conversation look like to you? She asked. Ryan didn't hesitate. It looks like two people disagreeing without assuming the other one is the villain. The audience burst into applause. Sunny waited for the reaction to fade before speaking again. That sounds good in theory, she said. Ryan nodded. It usually does. But in reality, Sunny continued, people want clear positions. Ryan tilted his head. Clear positions can sometimes oversimplify complicated issues. Sunny responded instantly. Or they can show courage. The audience reacted loudly to that line. Ryan chuckled softly. Now that, he said, was a very good line. A few people laughed. But Sunny wasn't smiling anymore. Do you think avoiding clear positions is safer? She asked. Ryan thought for a moment. Then he answered carefully. I think pretending every issue has a simple answer is what's dangerous. The audience murmured again. The conversation had now moved far beyond jokes. One of the hosts glanced toward the producers offstage, clearly aware that the interview had taken on a life of its own. Sunny leaned closer one more time. Let me ask you something very directly, she said. Ryan nodded. Go ahead. Sunny held his gaze. You're known for your humor, your sarcasm, your ability to turn every situation into a joke. Ryan smiled slightly. Occupational hazard. A few audience members laughed. But Sunny continued. So what happens, she asked quietly, when the joke stops working? The room fell silent. Ryan didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned back slowly in his chair, considering the question. For the first time since the interview began, The playful confidence on his face softened into something more thoughtful. Then he leaned forward again. And when he spoke, his voice was calmer than it had been all morning. "When the joke stops working," he said, "you stop joking." The audience waited. Ryan glanced around the studio once before finishing his thought. "And then you actually talk." The silence that followed felt heavy, because everyone in that room could sense something important about to happen. Sunny looked at him carefully. Ryan met her gaze. And for the first time during the entire interview, neither of them smiled. The conversation had reached its most serious moment yet, and the final question was still hanging in the air. The silence after Ryan's words felt almost surreal. "When the joke stops working, you actually talk." For a moment, no one in the studio moved. The audience sat frozen between curiosity and tension. The hosts glanced at each other briefly, unsure whether the conversation had just reached its conclusion or its most explosive point. Sunny Hostin held Ryan Reynolds' gaze across the table. Neither of them smiled now. For nearly a minute, the playful energy that had filled the interview earlier was completely gone. In its place was something far more serious. Two public figures in the middle of a very real conversation unfolding in front of millions of viewers. Sunny finally leaned forward again. "All right," she said quietly. "Then let's talk." A faint ripple moved through the audience. Ryan nodded slowly. "You asked earlier what happens when the joke stops working," Sunny continued. "So, here's the real question." The studio seemed to shrink as cameras zoomed closer. "When people with influence avoid taking clear positions on issues that matter," she said, "doesn't it leave the audience feeling like they're being entertained instead of respected?" Several audience members murmured. Ryan didn't rush his response. He rested his hands together on the table, thinking carefully before he spoke. "You know," he began, "I think audiences are smarter than we give them credit for." Sunny listened closely. "They know when someone is being genuine," Ryan continued. "And they know when someone is performing." The crowd reacted with soft claps. Sunny nodded slightly. "But what does being genuine look like to you?" she asked. Ryan took a breath. "It means admitting when you don't have every answer." The audience murmured again. "And sometimes," Ryan added, "it means refusing to pretend the world is simple just because people want quick statements." Sunny tapped her fingers lightly against the table. "That sounds like humility," she said. Ryan nodded. "Exactly." Sunny tilted her head thoughtfully. "But some people might say humility can also look like hesitation." Ryan smiled faintly again. "That's fair." Then he added something that made several audience members react immediately. "But certainty without reflection is usually worse." The crowd erupted in applause. The energy in the room had changed once more. The earlier tension was still there, but now it felt less like a confrontation and more like a genuine debate. One of the hosts leaned toward the table with a grin. "Well," she said, "this definitely turned into a deeper conversation than we expected." The audience laughed. Ryan turned toward her briefly. "Honestly," he joked lightly, "I thought we'd be talking about embarrassing stun injuries." The room burst into laughter again. Even Sunny smiled this time. But she wasn't done yet. She leaned forward once more, her voice calm but sincere. "Ryan," she said, "I appreciate that you stayed in this conversation." Ryan nodded respectfully. "I appreciate the questions." Sunny studied him for a moment. Then she asked the question that would become the most talked about moment of the entire interview. "Do you think humor and seriousness can truly coexist in public conversations?" Ryan leaned back slightly, considering it. The audience watched closely. After a moment, he answered, "I think humor is how people survive serious conversations." The crowd applauded again. But Ryan continued, "Serious conversations are how people grow." A louder wave of applause filled the studio. Sunny nodded slowly. "That might be the most direct answer you've given all morning." Ryan laughed softly.
"See?"
The joke stopped working. Even Sunny laughed at that. For the first time since the tension began, the atmosphere in the studio felt lighter again, but something about the conversation had clearly shifted. The audience sensed it too. People weren't just laughing anymore. They were thinking. The host beside Sunny glanced toward the cameras. "Well," she said, I have a feeling people at home are going to be talking about this interview all day. Ryan smiled. That makes two of us. The crowd laughed once more, but the energy now felt reflective rather than nervous. Sunny turned toward the audience. You know, she said, conversations like this are important. Ryan nodded in agreement. They are. The camera slowly pulled back, capturing the entire table again, the hosts, the guest, and the audience that had watched the tension rise and fall over the last several minutes. But what no one in the studio fully realized yet was how quickly the moment would explode outside the building. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, clips from the interview began circulating across social media. Viewers were already debating it. Some praised Ryan for calmly standing his ground. Others applauded Sunny for pushing difficult questions. Comment sections filled rapidly with opinions, arguments, and passionate reactions. News websites posted headlines within hours. Ryan Reynolds and Sunny Hostin's heated debate sparks online reactions. Did Ryan Reynolds just turn a talk show interview into a media debate? Clips of their exchange racked up millions of views. People slowed down specific moments. The line about outrage, the moment Ryan said leveling the playing field, and especially the quiet line that started it all. When the joke stops working, you actually talk. Back in the studio, long after the audience had gone home, producers were already reviewing the footage. They knew something unusual had happened. Not a shouting match. Not a meltdown. Something rarer. A tense, unscripted conversation that viewers couldn't stop watching. And that's exactly why moments like this spread so quickly online. Because when two strong personalities collide on live television, people everywhere want to decide for themselves who was right. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you think Ryan Reynolds handled the conversation well? Was Sunny Hostin right to challenge him with tough questions? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoy dramatic celebrity moments and powerful real-time storytelling like this, make sure you subscribe to Live Narratives, like this video, and turn on notifications. Because sometimes the most unforgettable moments on television are the ones no one planned.